Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at something absolutely massive happening in Southeast Asia right now. We're talking about how the Malaysian state of Sarawak is literally re-engineering its entire economy from the ground up to become this regional green powerhouse. And look, this isn't just about, planting a few trees. We are looking at a complete structural overhaul of their energy, their industry, and their international exports. So let's jump right in. I want to start right here because this number absolutely blew my mind when I first saw it. Over 60%. That is the chunk of Sarawak's power capacity that is already coming from renewable hydropower. While a lot of the world is still scratching their heads, trying to figure out how to transition away from fossil fuels for their baseline power, Sarawak has kind of already built this massive, functioning green foundation. But how exactly did they pull that off? And more importantly, what on earth are they doing with all that clean energy? Well, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll hit the hydropower foundation, then diversifying the green grid, powering regional industries, the ASEAN power grid, and finally, electrifying rural Sarawak. Part 1. The hydropower foundation, the mega dams. So this is where Sarawak's unique geography really comes into play. You don't just build a green energy engine overnight, right? It takes a multi-decade commitment to harness all that crazy rainfall and those massive river basins. The whole thing started way back in 1985 with the Bataan A plant, which was a pretty modest 108 megawatts. But look at this massive leap to the Bakun Dam in 2014, cranking out 2,520 megawatts. Then, boom, Muram in 2015. And they are definitely not stopping. The Balai project is under construction right now, and that's going to add another 1,285 megawatts by 2030. This strategy of building cascading dams is the secret sauce. It's what gives the state this incredibly cheap, super reliable, renewable baseline power. And just to put those abstract wattage numbers into physical perspective, think about the sheer scale of the Bakun Dam. It's not just a big concrete wall. The reservoir covers 720 square kilometers. Guys, that is literally the size of the entire nation of Singapore. It's actually one of the tallest concrete-faced rockfill dams on the planet. We're talking about landscape-altering infrastructure here, the kind that actually wins global awards. All right, Section 2, diversifying the green grid, going beyond just the dams. Because having a ton of hydro is fantastic, for sure, but relying on just one power source, that's risky. So Sarawak isn't just resting on its laurels here, they are actively layering their green technologies. A brilliant example is floating solar farms. Instead of clearing out valuable jungle land, they're planning to just slap solar panels directly onto those massive dam reservoirs we just talked about. They're actually looking at a mind-boggling 1 gigawatt floating solar setup at the Muram Reservoir right now. It's just an incredibly smart, efficient way to use the infrastructure they already have. Of course, solar comes with a catch, doesn't it? The sun goes down, and that brings us to BESS, or battery energy storage systems. If you're new to the term, just think of it as a giant shock absorber for the power grid. It basically soaks up all that excess energy when the sun is blasting, and then feeds it right back into the grid when the clouds roll in, which keeps everything super stable. And this isn't just theoretical. Take a look at this proposed 60 megawatt-hour BESS pilot project over at the Sejingkit power station in Kuching. By dropping these massive battery arrays right next to their existing power stations, they can totally optimize what they already have. It proves that a diversified green grid is actually being built as we speak. Now, part of this whole diversification master plan includes hydrogen, and we've got to look at this totally objectively. The vision is wild. They want to use all that abundant hydropower to run electrolyzers and literally become Southeast Asia's first hydrogen-driven economy by 2027. But reality check, the global market is tough to navigate. A few of their flagship export projects have actually had to be scaled back recently. Why? Well, electrolyzers require a massive amount of upfront capital. Shipping the stuff costs a fortune, and international buyers are dragging their feet on signing contracts. It's a classic case of massive ambition bumping into real-world economic headwinds. Which brings us to Section 3, powering regional industries through SCORE. So, apart from those big export dreams, where is all this energy actually flowing today? It's feeding straight into SCORE, the Sarawak corridor of renewable energy. And this is no ordinary business park. We are talking about a 320-kilometer-long economic development beast. The goal here is staggering, to lock in 334 billion ringgit in investments by 2030. By piping cheap, clean hydropower directly into these zones, Sarawak is basically making an offer that global manufacturers can't refuse. A perfect example of this in action is the Samalaju Industrial Park. This is where cheap, renewable hydro physically collides with heavy global manufacturing. It is tailor-made for energy-intensive industries that are desperate to decarbonize their assembly lines. I mean, if you're a heavy industry trying to hit those strict global climate targets, setting up shop right next to a cascading megadam system, that's a total no-brainer. And here is the real kicker, what officials like to call the green premium. Take the Samajaya High-Tech Park in Kuching. It's packed with top-tier semiconductor and precision engineering firms. When these global investors build their products here using green energy, their products end up with an incredibly low carbon footprint. In today's market, that makes them so much easier to sell globally. And the best part? That dynamic creates a massive ripple effect of high-skilled, high-paying jobs for the local workforce. Moving on to Section 4, the ASEAN power grid and how they're exporting influence. So, with domestic demand humming along, Sarawak is looking outward. They want to be the literal beating heart of the ASEAN power grid. They're already actively pumping up to 200 megawatts over to West Kalimantan in Indonesia. They're also building a colossal 1,375 megawatt joint venture dam in North Kalimantan. They've got plans to hook up with Sabah and Brunei soon, but the absolute crown jewel, supplying 1,000 megawatts straight to Singapore. This Singapore link is just a ridiculous engineering marvel. To get 1 gigawatt of clean energy over to the island, they have to lay more than 700 kilometers of high-voltage subsea cables. And because the geography of the region is so complex, about 70% of that cable has to run right through Indonesian waters. So it's not just an engineering headache. It is a massive exercise in geopolitical teamwork. They're aiming to start construction by 2026, with the switch flipping sometime between 2032 and 2035. Finally, Section 5. Electrifying rural Sarawak and the real local impact. We've spent a lot of time on multi-billion-dollar industrial parks and megadams, but how does all this trickle down to the folks living way off the grid? Sarawak has some incredibly remote jungle communities where dragging traditional high-voltage wires just doesn't make any logistical sense. Enter SARS, the Sarawak Alternative Rural Electrification Scheme. Instead of stringing hundreds of kilometers of wire, they just drop localized, standalone solar and battery systems directly into these remote villages. And the payoff here is totally profound. SARS has already lit up over 500 villages. That's 15,000 families who used to have to rely on loud, expensive, dirty diesel generators just to get power for a few hours a day. Now, they have reliable, 24/7 clean energy. It supports their households, it lets businesses stay open longer. It is an absolute game changer for social equity and the environment. And true sustainability isn't just about plugging into a solar panel. Check out the Kuching Integrated Waste Management Park. It centralizes landfills, incineration, water treatment, the whole shebang. It goes to show that as Sarawak aggressively scales up this industrial powerhouse, they are also making sure they have the plumbing in place to handle the resulting waste responsibly. It's about building a holistic ecosystem, not just chasing wattage. Which brings us to the big final question. We've seen the unbelievable scale of the megadams, the massive Score industrial corridor, and the subsea cables that are going to link the ASEAN grid. But we've also seen the serious reality checks facing their hydrogen dreams and the sheer effort it takes to make sure rural communities aren't left behind. So, can Sarawak pull off this high-wire act? Can they feed the voracious energy appetite of the global market while actually keeping things sustainable and equitable at home? Because if they can, they won't just be a powerhouse. They will literally rewrite the economic playbook for the entire region. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and keep questioning the mechanics of our changing world. I'll see you in the next one.